I'm Diego Cortez with Adam Schoenfeld. Welcome to The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker. We're going to have Gavin Griffin joining us. He's just come off a series of big wins, and we're going to get some interesting interview with him.
He's hot. Huge wins. But Dee, before that, why don't you check to see if we have anything in our inbox?
Let's see if anyone's mailed us some
Yes.
interesting questions or suggestions. Actually, anyone can email us at thescoop@cardplayer.com.
This is our Scoop inbox.
Suggestions for guests or questions for our guests.
This is a genuine George Nelson plywood letter tray from the 60s.
We actually have
I own this.
We actually have gotten about a half dozen suggestions for guests, and when we use the guest, or when the guest comes on, we'll send you some Full Tilt Poker and Scoop gear. And
We will?
Yeah.
I'm not sending
And,
anything.
and if we don't have any, we'll send what you've got.
My personal wardrobe.
But we also have other interesting questions. We have a question here from Harley D. Reed from Plymouth, Minnesota.
Plymouth, Minnesota.
And he writes some nice things about us, but he also has
This email is lengthy.
he has a nice question which I liked. He said, "We always are hearing bad beat stories, and frankly, no one wants to hear another bad beat story."
Correct.
Agreed. I'd like to hear about these great suck-out stories, getting your money in bad and hitting the river card. How did the bad beat recipient react? Was it a turning point in your tournament? What the heck were you thinking, and how could you get your money in so bad? Great question, because everyone's always talking about bad beats, which are fundamentally uninteresting. And in the suck-out, sometimes it's just pure luck and bad play, but a lot of times there really is a lot leading up to it that, in context makes it interesting. And I will say, when you made the World Poker Tour final table in LA, I still give you, a hard time for this about every week. You were like the
About every
fourth
day.
You were like the fourth or fifth man in a huge pot, in which you prevailed with a 2-outer against Billy Baxter. And whenever I
It was not a
see him,
2-outer.
I expect him to go, "You're friends with that fella, was fifth man in, gave me a 2." He's too much of a gentleman to say that, but I'm always cringing thinking he's going to pull me aside and talk about it. But please elaborate on it.
As usual, lies, distortions, and lies. The Diego Cortez story. What happened was, we were 10-handed at the World Poker Tour, and the final 6 are going to make the TV.
Right.
So in a sense, that's a bubble, because
Absolutely.
you want to be on the World Poker Tour, baby. Something you've never done, I'd point out.
Right. I've only played 3 World Poker Tour tournaments in my entire lifetime, but you're right, I'm 0 for 3.
With all your fancy bracelets and
Right.
lots of money. You keep the bracelets and money. I was on TV once.
You were right.
So we're 10-handed, and it's a high-tension situation, and we've been playing for a long time 10-handed.
Yeah.
And what happens is that Vinny Vin, who's a well-known player, who's had a lot of success at the World Series of Poker and World Poker Tours.
And leads to the aggressive side of play.
Right, and he is opening everything super loose for a raise. And Billy Baxter is to his immediate left. So about 3 separate times, Vinny would open, Billy would raise him or call him, and I'd raise the both of them from 2 spots farther down and take the pot. And these were significant pots because it's a raise, a re-raise, boom.
Huge.
And I was doing it with something, ace, queen, 7s. I always had something.
But you knew that Vinny was loose and Billy's exploiting that
Exactly.
by virtue of his position.
And so it really didn't matter what I had, because I am taking advantage of Billy, who's one of the greatest poker players of all time, I have to say, with his 7 World Series of Poker bracelets. Except, as I said,
I think he might have 8, actually, but either way.
I think he has 7, and I'm willing to bet.
Okay, we'll take that as a side bet.
And but as I said to Billy at the time, this ain't lowball, brother. So now for about the 4th time, Vinny raises, and in the interim, there's been another hand where Vinny raises, and he eventually shows down King Deuce,
right.
Just to give you an idea of the raising standards that he had.
Now, you weren't concerned that because you'd already employed this play a bunch of times that maybe Billy was getting ready, or that he wasn't going to give you the same credit as previously?
I should have been concerned, and maybe that was a mistake, but this tactics was working so successfully, and I was convinced that Billy was focused on Vinny.
Right. Well,
so
surely he was.
So now Vinny opens, Billy just minimum raises. That should have been red flag number 1 because he hadn't been making min raises earlier.
Oh, so this was a different...
Yeah, it had a slightly different flavor. And I looked down at my favorite hand to go broke with, pocket nines, and I can't remember what the exact blinds were, but I moved in for about 400,000 chips, which was not, it was a correct move in size. There was no, I couldn't raise and not move in.
And he didn't have the pot outs to call with a questionable hand. I mean, it was enough of a raise.
Right, I thought...
Put the pressure on him.
It wasn't... I thought Billy had hands, but I thought he'd lay down again because...
If he had something like an ace-jack or...
there's no chance,
he's going to lay down. He's not priced in.
And he might even lay down, ace-queen, those type of hands. So, Vinny folds as expected, and now Billy instantly calls me, and he's got 2 aces.
Right.
And it was a very sick feeling for me. So, yeah, that was a 2-outer. But now the flop comes... 6, 7, 6, 8, 10. 6, 8, 10.
You love that. Now you actually are having a chance.
And, of course, I don't say anything, but and there were probably 250 people watching, even though it's 3 in the morning, because we've been playing for a long time. And it was all of a sudden pandemonium. They were screaming.
All the people there watching someone at the front table owes them money or they have a piece of them.
And, of course, Billy is the perfect gentleman. He's super composed, and I'm not saying anything. But I could hear Evelyn in the background calling for a 7.
Right.
And sure enough, on the turn, 7.
Right, he's drawing dead now, drawing to the tie.
Right, drawing to a tie, and blank on the end. So this wasn't a river suck out, this was a turn suck out. And I had...
Well, right. This
is
is all the money in suck out.
I had close to a million chips, and Billy was crippled, and I think he was next out.
And you ended up in the final table and finished 5th. What's interesting about that story is that, the genesis of it is you're really playing against Vinny. He was playing so loosely and so weakly that you were making these plays, kind of squeezing Billy in the middle. That's how you ended up getting kind of trapped in there.
I was taking advantage of Billy reacting to Vinny, and I'd done it a lot. And earlier, I had a lot of success with raising Billy, and he gave me credit for hands because I hadn't shown down any bad hands.
I'm glad to hear this version of the story because...
Yeah, you and Jeff Schulman, it's like, you were 5th man. This is
I always the way, and I'm going to do some research because I still think that this is not accurate. The way I heard it, there was a guy all in, and then another guy came in over the top all in, and then another guy was all in, and then like Billy Baxter moved all in, and you had him covered by like 20,000 chips, and then you came all in with the 9s.
Yeah, I just essentially called all in.
So this is a better version.
Yes.
It explains things a lot better. Gavin Griffin is going to join us. He has won the biggest poker tournament ever in Europe, the EPT final, grand final, and then like right away just flew back here and still jet lagged. He wins WPT at Borgata.
Yeah, just another few million.
Which is pretty phenomenal. He was the youngest, at the time, the youngest WSOP bracelet winner ever. And he's really rolling, really hot right now, and he'll be an interesting guy to talk to.
I look forward to it.
So you went over to Europe, and you conquered the Europeans, maintaining the American pride. It used to be kind of a stereotype, but rooted in fact that the Europeans played a very different style. Europeans would come here for the World Series, and you knew right away that they had kind of a different approach and different style. Did you find that it was the same now, or different than all the tournaments here that you played?
I think it's probably pretty similar to that. That there's a different style over there, but I think one of the interesting things that you find when you go to Europe and play is it's kind of like the U.S. where East Coast players have a style, West Coast players have a style, Vegas players have a style. So that's also true in Europe. The Scandinavians are like your super aggros, and your English, and Irish guys usually play kind of tight.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with like Germans. Although it's kind of changing a little bit with the guys from the UK. They're starting to get a few more like a little looser. I think there's certainly a style change. But I think this year at Monte Carlo, they had 190 or 200 Americans play.
Right.
So there's still a lot of American players over there. that make the trip, especially because 18-year-olds that can't play anywhere in the U.S. are going over to play all the EPT events. So
because that's one key point, which is that here 21 is the minimum. So in these EPT events, you read about all these 18-year-old, 19-year-old guys who are internet phenoms, but have never played live, who just are playing in these tournaments and have done well.
Right, you're a veteran compared to these kids.
Right, exactly. I was just talking about this with Terrence Chan, who I'm actually staying with during the World Series. Like, I feel like Terrence and I are like kind of the bridge generation where there's like the older guys who start off playing live only,
right?
And then
Adam and myself.
and then
there's a nice term.
Yeah, and then there's like the guys like kind of in the middle who were playing live and like got in at the ground floor of internet poker, and then there's people like like Durr or David Benefield or guys like that who just started playing online and then transitioned to live. So there's certainly like some just absolute superstars who are 19 years old.
Yeah.
Like Isaac Barron or Jimmy Frick. Well, actually, Jimmy Fricky's 21 now, so he's playing in the World Series. Or like Adam Younglin, who's a great poker player. So like guys like that just are incredible at such a young age.
Do you feel when you talk to these kids? You won your World Series bracelet at Binion's, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's cool. Don't you think that's cool?
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Binion's was such a cool place. Like, it's so there's a cool atmosphere at the Rio, but the difference is like at the Rio it's kind of the atmosphere is because of like the scale of the situation.
That's absolutely right.
You walk into the poker room and there's 220 tables or whatever, and there's people at every table, and then there's 3 other rooms with more tables and more people. But at Binion's, it was upstairs and and was it Benny's bullpen. Right.
You're lucky in a sense that you got to experience that.
Yeah,
I feel like
sure.
I was lucky to experience that for several years, and you almost can't describe it to a 19-year-old who's just starting on the internet now. Like that flavor, it'll never be reproduced ever.
Right. Like what if you were to take someone over to Binion's, like who's never been there, and like, hey, this is where it started. They're like, this is where it started. Like, what?
You were kidding,
Right. Yeah.
That right in the corner there, right between the slot machines, you'd have the biggest cash games going too.
Right. Yeah.
And these big tournaments.
Yeah.
But we were talking the other day about whether bracelets have been devalued or not, and of course they have not been devalued at all. I mean, it's harder than ever to win one.
Right.
But there's so much going on, like you say. When you won at Binion's, I mean, it was like this 21-year-old kid just won a bracelet, the youngest winner ever. It was like really news. Everyone, was up there curious, watching.
Right.
Now you've got 3 or 4 tournaments going on simultaneously, and so much going on even outside of the World Series of Poker that it wouldn't even have the same impact, when for someone to set that record.
Yeah, I think like it's when I broke the record, I broke Alan Cunningham's record, which is great. I mean, anything that I could do that Alan does is I'll do it, right? But yeah, like, and then Eric Froelich broke it, and then Jeff Madsen and then Steve Belarakis, and probably like 10 guys since I won my bracelet.
If it was permitted, a 12-year-old.
Right, exactly. Right.
Well, right. That's the one thing. The other thing is that inevitably, like within 5 or 10 years, it'll be down to this guy was 21 and 4 hours.
Right.
He broke the 21-year-old in 8 hours.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious that it's headed that direction. Now, no one in the poker world has had a year like you've had. I mean, you win the biggest tournament ever in Europe, and then you followed up by winning a WPT event at the Borgata. So is it just a matter of running well because you've been a very good winning player for a while?
I hear it's luck. That's what I heard.
Well, I mean, luck on top of obviously being a good player to begin with. Or have you really actually made some adjustment or some breakthrough that somehow is taking it to this incredible level?
Yeah, I've actually made like some adjustments. After I won my bracelet in 2004, like I kind of started to play the way that people expected me to based on what they saw on TV. And I really started to lose like quite a bit of confidence because like 2 years I went without any significant tournament cashes. So
specifically, what did they expect you to play, and what was it that you were doing?
I just started playing like super aggro because like that's how it looked on the final table, right? Like the final table, yeah, exactly,
and,
putting like 80% of my chips in with like pocket fours or some stupid thing like that in like a situation where I don't need to.
You made a bluff on that final table that had Norman Chad weighing himself. He was so excited, but it was a great play. But I mean, he really built it up, and I think that's probably the defining image of you winning.
Right.
That tournament.
Yeah, for sure. There's actually two of them that were. One of them was kind of a standard play where like I limped on the button with 8-9, and then it got checked to me twice. So I mean. Sure, I mean, if you check to me twice, no matter what, I mean,
just as a gentleman,
right? Yeah, right. So, and then there was another one where, like, I had a 7-5 and came 6-4-4, and I check raised, or I didn't really check raise. I called the first like min bet from Gary Bush, and then Gabe Thaler made like almost a pot size raise, and then I re-raised over the top.
That's what
of
I
it.
remember.
Yeah.
That's what I'm referring to. And I guess Gabe was a very good player.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
of course I'm not gonna try that against someone I mean who I don't think can make the laydown. So, but yeah, so I just started like trying to live up to that and not really like playing the way I was for that tournament up until that point. You know, on the final table, the chips are shallow. You can put a bunch of money in with 2 4s against Ace Jack, and hopefully you get there, right? But I was like applying that to like early game situations, and I'm building huge stacks and blowing them off like crazy in every tournament. So
people have seen you on TV, so now they're also even more disposed to call you.
Yeah,
which
exactly,
really
right.
Damages things.
Which is good.
Which is good now, but not if you're like still playing that style too much.
It takes a lot of self-awareness to come to that realization, and some people get trapped into that, living up to other people's expectations or living up to their own unrealistic expectations, and they never recover. So it probably took you a while to come to that.
Yeah, it did take a while, and I guess I just kind of had I don't know when or like what exactly happened. I just had like a breakthrough. Like I mean, I'm not running bad for this long. I'm doing something wrong, right? There's no way that I'm this I'm unlucky to the point where I'm 2 years later and I haven't made any other like major final tables. So. So yeah, it certainly came to a point where I just said, let me look at what I'm doing and let me figure out what it is that I'm doing wrong, and then let's try to fix that.
I noticed that in the couple of years after you won your bracelet, I'd see you playing reasonable stakes on PokerStars. Is that part of your philosophy to manage your bankroll in a conservative way, or were you adjusting to that perception that you weren't doing so well?
No, I just don't. Especially online, I don't play that big. Like, every once in a while, if there's like a really good game that's like 100, 200, 200, 400, I'll play. But I try to kind of limit the stakes I play online just because, first of all, I don't think I'm that good of an online poker player. I think I'm much better playing live. But there's so much extra risk involved with playing online because I have a higher tilt factor online, and it's a lot easier to lose a lot of money online than it is
a lot quicker
live, right? A lot quicker, right? So I certainly wanted to limit my exposure to like the bigger games, just because I don't want to
I think
just be like blown out of the water like right away.
I remember when I'd see you playing, and it wasn't like super low, but you were playing 30-60 limit hold'em, and I remember thinking, I didn't know you then, and I don't know you really well, but I thought, this guy has a chance to really be successful because he's in control of himself.
That's already a good sign right there. that you don't go right away into like the biggest games and new games. I see guys win big tournaments, and not only they're playing huge, but they're playing like maybe mixed games, which they never played before, or PLO, and they're like, well, it's close to no limit hold'em. They really are specialists in no limit hold'em. They win a big tournament, and now they're way out of their depth. When you talk about making this adjustment, did you talk to other players, or did you have any, was it more an internal kind of discussion, or did you talk to other people and try and get kind of another perspective on what you were doing?
I'd say it was more internal. I'm not really I don't really discuss like my ideas on poker all that much. I've kind of like formulated my weird strategy in my head, and I don't feel like I can apply the way I play. I don't feel like too many people could be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? But it works for me, so that's what I do. But I would say that for the most part, it was just I think this is what I'm doing wrong. Let me try to do this, and then kind of that fix worked.
When was it that you kind of made this transition in your mind?
I'd say it was probably like last year, right before Harrah's the circuit in Rincon, where I finished third. I felt like that's the first tournament where I actually put it together and felt like, all right, now I've got it. Even though I feel like I made a mistake at the final table, but whatever that happens, it was against David Williamson or Davidson Matthews, so
right.
it's easy to make mistakes against him.
Speaking of doing things right, you're still in the 1500 massive
Right.
second event.
4,000 people.
Right, and you
first
had
event.
a monster chip stack fairly early on, and you got into a battle with our buddy Shane Schlager.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that hand? Because I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, so I had actually I thought it was like a really bad beat because I've got like 65,000 or whatever.
It was a huge first day total. We started
like
with 3,000
400,
chips.
800, or like 300, 600. I've got 60,000 chips, right?
100 big blinds.
Right. It was just ridiculous in a tournament where you start with less than 100 big blinds, right?
Right.
So I was actually really happy because I'm controlling my table well, and I feel like I have like a good table, and I get moved to Shane's table, and he's got like 50,000 in chips, right? And like of the people in the tournament who had like a lot of chips, he's I probably don't want to be sitting at like with someone who has 50,000 and has an idea how to play, right?
A twisted idea, maybe. But an idea nonetheless.
Maybe, yeah. So actually, another guy that we know came over and saw that we were sitting at the same table with both like 50,000 chips. He's like, I give it like 15 minutes until one of you has 100,000 and the other one is broke or whatever.
It's like elk rutting. There's going to be a confrontation.
Right.
I like to do a lot of hunting references. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I figured it was either going to be we would completely avoid each other or play one giant pot and see what happens, right? So what happens is it's 400, 800 with 100 ante. Shane raises to 2,400. I call with Queen Jack of clubs. He raised from like, I guess under the gun plus like 2 or something like that, and I called from the cutoff with Queen Jack of clubs. The button moves in for like 5,500 more.
Right.
And both blinds fold, and it gets around to Shane, and he thinks for a while and just calls, which is like the key point of this hand, because if he re-raises,
Right,
I fold,
Of course.
and I've got 63,000, and maybe we play a big pot later, but we certainly aren't going to get involved here.
And him being out of position there against another good player with a big stack, he really needs to. If he does have a big hand, he's going to move in there. He can't really. He's not likely to really just smooth call.
Actually, I disagree. Like I think he's somewhat likely to call with like aces in that situation, knowing that I'm capable of playing a big pot with relatively small hand. So I think he calls a pretty wide range there.
Okay.
I think it's pretty much anything that he's raising, he's calling, even if it's like aces. I think he might, maybe with like queens or jacks, he'd re-raise, just because then you get into awkward situations.
Right, he's going to be out of position with an overcard.
Exactly. So, but I think with like aces, kings, and like anything like tens, nines, eights, or
Right.
whatever, or ace king, I think he just calls. And possibly with ace king, he would re-raise too. So.
Well, that's what I say. There's some.
Yeah.
Certainly, he's limited.
There's certainly
to play
a
lot of
range.
hands, but there's some hands that it wouldn't make any sense for him to call. That
Right.
you can eliminate out of your.
Right. Exactly. So I call. Flop comes 9, 10, 4. And he bet 7,500.
Were there any clubs?
There's one club,
Okay.
yeah. There's one club. 9, 10, 4, bet 7,500. I call.
So relatively small bet for the pot.
Right.
You bet that's under half pot, I think.
Yeah. So it's well under half the pot, and I.
Oh, right. It's
If he
50
had
plus.
bet if he had bet a little more, I might have raised him. But
Right.
like since he's laying me such a nice price, and
Yeah.
why get involved? In,
Why
like,
raise him and
exactly
moved in on?
right? Yeah. So now the turn is a 10, which I think is a really good card for me. And Shane thinks for a while and checks, and he's got like 32 or 33,000 left, and I bet 18,000. And he went into the tank for maybe a minute, and then moved all in for 14,000 more. And obviously, I mean, I insta called. You know, I mean,
You have no choice.
Right.
Oh, right.
And he showed 2 8s, which is one of the a pretty bad hand for him to have against me, right? And then the river's an 8, so I make my queen eye
You made
straight,
it.
and he makes the full house.
You got there.
Right? Yeah. Right. So I mean, I guess I have 14 outs on the turn or whatever. So I'm not it's not like I'm unhappy that the money went in, but I wish that the result was a little different.
It's a tough one because certainly he could fold. I mean, obviously, what you get on the turn is to get him to fold. And actually, you probably put him on that type of hand. Not the 8 specifically, but where he could have. I mean, he has you beat with a hand that's doesn't totally fit the board. He's either got an ace king or an ace queen or something, or he's got an under pair.
Right.
So at that point, you're just hoping he lays down.
When Shane moves in, he has to know 100% that you're going to call.
Right.
So, did he have such a great read, do you think, that he was ahead with 8s?
I guess
Well,
so.
at that point, if he's going to call, he has to move in. That's the thing.
Right.
I mean, this is exactly the irony. This is, of course, the difference that you've advanced and I haven't. Is I was in the exact same situation, and the guy moved in, and where I had. It was a slightly different hand because I had re-raised before the flop and then tried to make another play on the flop. But the guy really was like. He spent a long time legitimately thinking because he had an under pair and there's a jack on the flop, but with the chip counts he was either going to fold or he was going to move in. There's no reason for him to just call and then see what happens on the river. And so I'm sure he was close to folding, but if he was going to call, then
for sure.
I understand, but he must have considered folding. Did Shane think a long time?
He thought I think he certainly considered folding. Maybe not for very long, but he considered it. He wasn't really happy when I bet the turn. Right. You could see that he didn't really like that I bet the turn. So
here's the psychology of the bet amounts too, where you said 33,000 left.
Right.
You bet 18,000, which. On one level, it looks like you're enticing him to call, which may make him fold, thinking of that. Well, if he really just was trying to shut me out of this, he might just try to put me all in for all the chips. Then the flip side is sometimes when you move in, it really looks like, well, I'm kind of making an overbet here, but to look weak. And I mean, when you're playing against a real player, it gets to those extra levels where
I considered shoving. But I really felt like he would call a lot wider if I shoved than if I bet kind of a normal amount. And also I play with Shane enough that he knows that I don't often shove, overbet shove. So he would probably realize that the overbet shove meant that I didn't have too much.
I've always one other interesting part of the hand to me is the kind of the smallish bet, because in the old days, it was so rare for someone to really underbet the pot or make a small bet. Now, especially, it seems on the internet especially, but you see a lot of these kind of weekly small bets, kind of like pro bets, and I was always very skeptical of them, but they can work pretty well. And in this situation, he laid you a great price, but I think he did get a lot of information, because with that flop, a 10 high flop, if you had a pair of 10s, or if you had a pair of nines, say like an ace nine, who knows, something that beats him but that fits in with that board, he might think, well, you're really motivated to raise on the flop because a turn card can really hurt your hand so much. If you just have a pair of 10s, Jack, Queen, King, Ace, all can kill your hands, except for the one that whatever's the overcard or so. Right. So from that standpoint, maybe in this case, his little pro bet really gave a lot of information that you just had either 2 overcards, or maybe you had a smallish pair that you weren't really ready to push with.
Yeah, that's certainly possible, because I might I might just smooth call his raise pre-flop with 2 jacks or 2 queens right?
That too.
And then
on the flop,
but then I actually know that pre-flop is when and then I don't re-raise pre-flop, so you can take jacks or queens out of my range. Is that right? I mean, you can probably take ace queen, ace jack out of my range. You can probably take ace 10 out of my range too. So I guess he probably did get quite a bit of information from the pre-flop the fact that I smooth called and then smooth called again,
Right.
and then on the flop the fact that I just called.
Even if you had jacks or queens, which I don't think would be crazy, given
Right.
the stacks that just call pre-flop, you're in position, see what happens
Right.
on the flop. If you have jacks now, 10 high flop, I mean, you can't just let him bet 7,500, so he can take that.
Right.
Just on the off chance that you had that, he can
Right.
take that off. The only hands he's really in trouble with are like kings or aces, which you might have just smooth called with there.
True, yeah.
And just let him keep coming.
Yeah, in which case it wouldn't have mattered because he hit the 8 on the river anyways.
Yeah, well, that's a separate issue there.
Yeah.
So after that hand, you're knocked way down.
Right, yeah, I had like 10 or 12,000 left, and then I actually doubled through Shane with ace king against ace queen. That got me to like 25, and then won a couple small pots, and then busted a guy with the 9s against ace king. And I ended the day with like 34,000.
So you feel
Yeah,
comfortable with it.
like if someone told me at the beginning of the day that I was going to end the day with 34,000, I'd be pretty happy,
course,
right?
yeah.
It's not obviously not the desired way to get to 34,000, but I can't
That's
complain.
over now, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I started yesterday, I was already on tilt because I felt with the starting stack of 3,000, in my mind I'm thinking, Shane's already got 120,000. I'm way behind.
There is some of that psychology with
Yeah.
multiple starting days.
Yeah,
Like not so
for
much
sure.
in this event, but in the main event, that definitely gets into people's heads. Where after the first day, the second day, some crazy guys have
Right.
300,000 in chips or so,
Right.
and you're like, I've only built up from 20,000 to 50,000. I got to get going.
But yeah, it's not really true.
But it does affect people who or they're certainly affected by. There's already kind of been an average established for the end of the day, which is pretty irrelevant. But people really focus like I've got to get to that average by the end of the day.
I think average stack is such an overrated stat.
It's crazy.
I mean, it doesn't do anything for you. Like all it means is like here's the number of chips in play. Here's how many people left. Here's how many like. It has no bearing on anything in the tournament at all.
It's by far the most irrelevant stack.
I mean, the only thing that I gain from knowing what the average stack is like it's an indicator of whether the tournament has a good structure or not.
Right.
Like if the average stack is never below like 30 or 40 big blinds, that is a great structure,
Right,
and
yeah.
hey, sweet, good job.
If you're at 9 right away,
Right? Yeah. So, like, but
which is the case online a lot of times, in
Right.
tournaments or whatever. What really matters, of course, is just how many chips you have in relation to the blinds and the antes, because
Yeah.
whether you have a chance to play or not. But even if you're looking at the field, what matters is the median, which
Right.
is where you stand in relation to the rest of the field. The average can be distorted by one guy having a huge stack, and a lot of
Exactly.
times it is.
And I think the other major thing as far as is your chip stack in relation to the other people at your table.
Of course.
That's
More than anything.
the only thing that really basically the average stack at your table
Yeah.
could mean something, right?
Yeah.
But
And depending on what blinds you're playing.
right,
If
exactly.
people are pressured
yeah,
or
for
not.
sure.
You mentioned that you consider yourself, and I suppose you've had a lot better results live than online, and it's hard to win. You haven't won 5 or 6 million recently online, but what is it that makes a big difference for you? Is it that you rely a lot on tells and on the feel of the table, or is it just a different pace?
I certainly rely a lot on feel. A lot of my game is instinctual and very, very much feel based. So it's hard to get that online. You can't, especially because I get bored playing one table, so I'm playing 8 tables at a time or whatever, and watching TV and listening to music or whatever.
Right.
And so I don't focus anywhere near as well online as I do live. I think that's a huge portion of why I'm much better live than I am online. And then also, like I said, I've got kind of a big tilt factor online. I get live. For instance, after the hand with Shane, it didn't really affect me. I was just like, okay, whatever. I've got 12,000. I'm
to
still
get back to
alive.
work, right.
Let's go,
Yeah.
right? And
the slower
online,
pace-
I'd be like throwing things. I'd
really
have a broken mouse.
shout inside the-
Yeah, right. I think I've broken 2 laptops in my
Really?
time, playing poker. So, and countless mice. So,
See, that's just funny because you come. I mean, even when I've talked to you,
Yeah,
for
you're super well composed.
You're
Yeah.
always so gentlemanly and calm.
Right.
So
The other side.
right,
the other
exactly.
side,
It's the dark side. The dark side that comes out on Sundays.
I know you've got to get ready for the tournament and hopefully go on to win. But one thing that I didn't know that I learned is I saw, when you won in Europe and you had the pink hair, and I've seen other pictures of you with the pink hair, I always thought this is just some young American punk just, tweaking the Europeans. But actually, to my embarrassment, there's a really profound reason for that.
Yeah, well, my girlfriend, Kristen, was diagnosed with breast cancer a little over 5 years ago, and she had surgery on October 31st of 2003 to have it removed. She hopefully will make it to the 5-year line this year without any complications. That's kind of the 5-year line is where you kind of, your chance to get cancer scales back to whatever a normal person's chance to get cancer is. So I dyed my hair pink in support of breast cancer research and awareness, and we did the Avon Walk for breast cancer last year, which I will probably never do again because it was just so hard. But we were still involved in raising money, and this year I decided to wear a pink shirt every day instead of the pink hair, because last year during the World Series we had a family wedding in Omaha, and I had this fuchsia hair.
That's big in Nebraska.
Even for a good cause, a lot of explanation required.
It's not so great, and we have another wedding in Omaha this year. So I was actually going to go with a full-on pink mohawk this year, but I've decided against it because I don't really feel like dealing with the stares and weird questions.
If you get pulled over in Nebraska and you have that hairdo, you might still be in jail by the next World Series.
Yeah, exactly.
They might not let you out.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's a great cause. It's fantastic that you're supporting that. Make people aware in a great way. So, Gavin, thanks for joining us here on The Scoop. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker. Make sure to write us at thescoop@cardplayer.com and watch for new episodes on Card Player TV.